Pero as far as I know, the expression blend, ginamit nila yung architectural pattern na yan to separate the concern between the view, the model, and also interaction between the two layers. Alright? So this is a classic example of, partitioning dependencies. So one thing that you want to decide on early on is to actually come up with a layered projects so that you could avoid dependencies. For example, you could come up with a project like that wherein your model, all of the classes that actually represent your real-world objects are placed in a separate project. So we can call that model. So we have there an example, calculator. And then we have another project for the user interface. And we can call that MVVM WPF. So that contains only SAML file. And later on, I'm going to show you how you could actually avoid writing code behind on SAML file. But still, you could actually achieve, you can interact with the end user. You can change your data source, and when there are some changes on the data source, your UI can actually be notified. Okay, and we have the view model there. So the view model, the responsibility of the view model is basically facilitate the interaction between the model and the view. Okay, the view does not know that there is a model, and the model does not know that there is a view that is using it. All right. So as regards to model, let me go back. You have to concentrate on solving business problems in that layer. Okay. And it must be ignorant on the context it will be used. I mentioned earlier that it doesn't care whether what kind of client code is going to use it. Okay, and usually the people who have a great understanding of the business processes are actually the ones helping the developer, write your business model classes. All right. So let me go back to encapsulation. What does encapsulation mean? I'm sure John mentioned about this one. This is very important, encapsulation. So encapsulation is a mechanism, is a manner in which we hide the internals of our classes, so that client code or code that are external to the class cannot have a direct access to the state of your data, right? It doesn't matter as far as the client code is concerned. It doesn't matter how you want to represent the data internally. Okay, as long as they can get the data and present and use that data. Okay, so you don't want them to have access directly. So as you can see, I have there a sample of a class that does not, use or enforce encapsulation. So the internal data email address string was defined to have a public access modifier, and therefore any client code can change the state of that data. So you could modify that so that you could actually encapsulate the field or the data, and then the client code can actually have access to that. Let's say if you want to assign value to that private field, the client code is going to call a particular that can do that using the constructor. And inside the constructor, you could have a number of validation, right? And the client code does not care about that anymore, as long as it can have an indirect access to that field. Okay. So you try to think about writing code that actually encapsulate the data of your classes. Okay, one of the principles that we've been telling in the community is to follow the principle of dry, or do not repeat yourself. So it means that if you are writing your source code and you are you are noticing that you are writing duplicate code, you start refactoring your code so that any duplicate code are removed from your application. Okay, so it's really a key concept, because in terms of maintenance, if you're gonna avoid duplicate code, and then in terms of maintenance, you change one part of your application, and then you forgot that you copied that set of code in another part of your application. Okay, and then you forgot to change it. Of course, you are introducing bug, right? because the first set you're able to modify, but the copy of that part of code was not modified. So you are introducing code. So you could actually refactor your code so that you could probably place the set of code into a function or a method, so that you could just simply call that method. Okay. Alright, so the view makes your model's code usable, okay, and you use it to present data that your model provides, and the view accepts input from the user, similar to what Jerome was showing earlier, right? So he was showing about you could actually change the some of the data, you could present data in the form. So while you could actually do that also in WPF, what you are doing here is basically to get the data, okay, or present the data, but you do not have direct access to your models. No? So you just let the view model work on that. Okay, so in terms of presenting your data, you could use a number of controls, and that includes listbox, listview, and data grid. And all of that control, you could actually control how you would want to present your data, no, in the listbox. It's very powerful. So it has what we call a data template. No? So all of that controls, they have data template, wherein you could actually design how you would like to present your data. Okay, it's very powerful. So you try to think about using WPF instead of using Windows Forms, okay? Si Jerome, eh. So, yung mga sinasabi ni Jerome kanina, huwag yun isipin yan, joke lang. Okay. Anyway, so events. So the way we interact with the end user is through events, right? So you click the button, and then you handle the event in the code behind. However, you could use the pattern code commands, okay, wherein you're gonna separate a layer for the invoker, okay. So probably your UI invokes certain commands, and then your receiver is actually working on whatever is contained in that command. And basically, what you are doing is you are creating another layer that handles the command from the user interface. So instead of responding to events, okay, you are actually handing some commands triggered by the user interface. So you could use the command pattern. So separating your view from model. So that is the first step, okay, in fencing off responsibilities. Meaning you are separating the concern between your view and your model, okay. But the view is not insulated yet, from changes in the model and vice versa. And therefore, you have to use a particular architectural pattern in order for you to actually separate the concern between your view and then your model. So as you could see there, we have the model view X pattern, wherein the X is basically the mediator. No? So it mediates between the interaction between the view and the model. Okay. So the mediator pattern came from the book of Gang of Four. Okay. So what it does basically, it operates between the two major subsystems. So if the mediator operates between the two major subsystems, we can consider our view as a major subsystem and our model as another major subsystem. And the way those colleagues, they can actually communicate, interact using the mediator. So sabi nga ni Gang of Four, the mediator promotes loose coupling by keeping objects from referencing each other, okay, explicitly. So it means, I have to go back to what I said earlier. Your view does not know that there is a model, and the model does not know that there is a view. Okay. So in terms of coupling and cohesion, you could see from the diagram I showed there. So in order for you to achieve a good software, okay, the cohesion must be strong and the coupling must be loose. Okay. So loose coupling insulates one component from changes in other components, and high cohesion allows the components to focus on its main intent. So kung view, dapat ang focus niya is basically to present data and also to accept inputs from the end user. Kung model, dapat ang intent niya, ang ginagawa lang niya is basically to actually solve, diba? Real world problems, behaviors, properties. Yun lang yung na-contained ng model. So, how do we separate them? So we could use a view model in between, and arguably it is the most important part of MBBM. So you can build rounded view model with a number of .NET framework and classes and interfaces. So ibig sabihin, gagamit ka ng a number of classes and interface in the .NET framework in order for you to achieve yung pinag-usapan nating separate of concern. Alright, so I have a project template installed on my machine wherein it automatically creates a number of projects and also a stub architectural, design wherein it shows you the, the separation of concern using the model view model. Okay, so let me show you how it is done. So I'm going to open a Visual Studio. So unfortunately, I cannot distribute the source code, but I hope we can provide you with a good, project in terms of creating a WPF application following the model view model architectural pattern. So let's create a new project. Alright, and then here I have my template, model view model template project, and then I click OK. And then it will do a number of things. It will ask me whether or not I'm going to create a WPF view project or Silverlight view project. So let me select WPF. So you could also create your own template so that the moment you create a project, you decide to create a project, it's already there. So you are being guided, no? And then if you want to create a test project against your WPF, you can also do that. Let me uncheck that and click next. And then I'm going to create a skeleton MBBM project, and then I'm going to discuss with you, a number of major components or aspect of that set of projects. Okay, so they said that while the Visual Studio is thinking, don't disturb it, because if you disturb it, it hangs. Okay? Pinapatawa ka lang kayo, ha? So wala namang pulis sa labas. Anyway. Alright, so let's try to run this. Let me set this as my startup project. Okay, so let's run that. Okay, so this is a sample application that allows the user to input certain values on text box and then display the result to the end user also. So 12 plus 34, that's basically, let's add that, and the result will be displayed here. Okay, so what happens there? When I click add, okay, there is no event that was handled by the application, but there was a message sent to the view model, okay, and that is in the form of command, and the view model elegantly handled that and then change the property of one of the objects that is used by the view, and then it automatically notifies the UI. That's how it works. No? Hindi ka na nagdagdag ng code para i-query uli si database or si model mo para malaman mo kung anong change. Automatically, i-notify niya. Alright, so I'm going to show you later on the source code, but meantime, let me continue with my slide. So, as you can see, the project created a class called calculator. Okay, so let me open the view. So I have here a calculator, and this simply demonstrates that my calculator is not dependent on any external code. So it simply implements the iCalculator and then implements the add method, of the iCalculator interface. And that's it. And then it returns a value. And then this is my view. So as you can see, my view